The sunny June morning of 2010 began with an unusual commotion on East Chaparral Road in Scottsdale, Arizona. 4 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a 2-story white house nestled in the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors peeked through curtains as officers in bulletproof vests positioned themselves around the area, whispering guesses about what was happening in the home of the old man who had lived reclusively for many years. Inside, Richard Wade, 79 years old, a former television star once beloved by all of America, was preparing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for decades since the height of his fame. A rapid knocking at the door echoed at 6:30 a.m. Richard Wade, Maricopa County Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the death of Eleanor Wade at Canyon Lake in 1964. The officers later described how the old man's hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had known, as if he had been waiting for this moment for half a century. 11:45 p.m. on November 28, 1964. The yacht Splendor Tow lay anchored quietly in the middle of Canyon Lake, Arizona, with golden lights spilling from the lower cabin, mingling with the hazy monsoon rain. Waves lapped gently against the hull, each gust of cold wind carrying mist and the scent of gasoline into the air. Inside the cabin, the strained laughter from dinner had long since faded. Eleanor Wade, the 33-year-old actress at the peak of her career, sat across from her husband, Richard Wade, the hot television star of the 60s. Between them was a nearly empty bottle of bourbon. The words started small but grew sharper as Eleanor delivered a cold remark about her co-star Christopher Dalton, who was also aboard the boat. Richard hurled his glass to the floor, shattering it, and in that moment, the captain Dennis Vaughn from the wheelhouse clearly heard the argument. A chair scraping over, then the bottle breaking more forcefully. After the crash came absolute silence. Wind whistled through the railings, windows rattling in the sudden storm. Vaughn descended a few steps, called out loudly, but no one answered. As he approached the guest cabin, the light in Eleanor's room went out completely. Richard appeared in the hallway, face flushed, saying curtly, "Get back to the wheelhouse, Dennis. Everything's fine now." Vaughn obeyed, but in the thick rain, he still felt something was off. Near midnight, the small engine noise from behind the boat sounded for a few seconds, then stopped. Vaughn thought maybe someone was checking the anchor line. By around 1 a.m., the storm had eased, visibility still poor. When the captain went back to check the stern deck, he didn't see Eleanor anywhere. The door to her room was ajar, a shawl fallen on the floor, and in the corner of the deck, the small dinghy usually tied close to the hull was no longer there. Vaughn rushed in to tell Richard, but the man was chillingly calm. She must have gone ashore already. No one yet understood how, amid the heavy rain and pitch-black night, a woman afraid of water could have left the boat on her own. At 1:30 a.m., Richard picked up the radio phone and called Maricopa County Police, his voice steady. "My wife is missing. She's no longer on the boat." Rain still lashed the lake like whips, the wind whistling through the Splendor railings, sounding like taut metal being dragged. Richard Wade sat motionless in the cabin, hands cradling his head, while Captain Dennis Vaughn stood silently on the deck, eyes scanning the pitch-black darkness where the woman had vanished. At 1:45 a.m., all the boat's lights were turned on full, illuminating the choppy water littered with debris. Vaughn activated the searchlight, sweeping it slowly around the hull. The feeble beam cut through the whitecaps, but saw nothing but rain and fog. He shouted Eleanor's name 3 times, his voice hoarse in the wind. No one answered, only the steady, chilling slap of waves against the hull. When the distant wail of rescue horns sounded, the eastern sky had begun to pale, signaling dawn's approach. 2 Maricopa County patrol boats cut across the lake, red lights flashing and reflecting off the water. The first officers boarded, carrying flashlights and communication gear, quietly beginning the search. Vaughn recounted the night's events, while Richard sat slumped in a chair, eyes vacant, barely speaking. A team of rescuers began combing the area around the Splendor II. 2 local divers, equipped with scuba tanks and lines, dove into the deep water astern of the boat. The rain had stopped, but the fog remained thick, limiting visibility to a few meters. They encountered rocks, driftwood, lakeweed, but nothing else. By 8 a.m., a helicopter from Phoenix arrived, hovering overhead. From above, the pilot reported spotting a light-colored object drifting toward the eastern shore. When the patrol boat approached, it was a small wooden dinghy, capsized, with Splendor 2, AZ, carved on the side. It had been battered against the rocks, paint chipped, anchor line still intact. Inside the dinghy, no one, just a canvas shoe, and a few dried drops of liquor stuck to the wooden floor. Vaughn looked at the object and shook his head. This dinghy couldn't have drifted off on its own. I tied it double-knotted. Nearby, amid the water glinting faintly in the weak sunlight, a red object bobbed up, drifting slowly among the ripples. An officer reached out with a pole and fished it in. It was Eleanor's wool coat, heavy with water, a long strand of hair still clinging to the collar. Vaughn recognized it immediately, his hands shaking as he held the hem. "She was wearing it when she went on deck," he said softly. Police expanded the search radius, dividing the lake into 4 zones. Small boats swept through each stretch of water, their engines blending with the wind. A tracking dog was brought to the southern shore, barking loudly upon smelling the coat, but then standing still, no clear direction. The sun rose higher, its light piercing the thick fog, revealing the fatigue on the faces of those searching. On the boat, Vaughn opened the locker for a flare gun, intending to fire one to mark the position, but Richard stopped him. The man said quietly, his voice raspy, "No need, they won't find anything." That remark sent a chill through Vaughn. He looked at the man before him, calm to the point of coldness, then stepped outside, avoiding his gaze. In the afternoon, the wind shifted, bringing cold air from the desert. Another rescue team used long fishing lines, casting iron hooks to probe the current's direction. Each pull yielded only weeds and branches. Police stood silently on the shore, observing, while the helicopter continued circling. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew the chances of survival were nearly zero. In the distance, the yacht Splendor II remained anchored in place, its faint golden light spilling onto the sodden hull. Vaughn sat in the wheelhouse, eyes fixed on the black, fathomless water below. "She never would have gone down there alone," he muttered. Night fell again, the lake returning to stillness. The rescue boats headed back, leaving faint long wakes. In the cold expanse, only the fading engine noise and the twinkling lights of the police boats reflected on the water remained. The Splendor sank back into silence, like the night before, only this time, everyone knew something inexplicable had happened on that boat. The morning of November 29, 1964, Canyon Lake still lay under a layer of cold fog. The rescue helicopter had departed, leaving only 2 police patrol boats anchored near the Splendor. The atmosphere on the boat was so heavy that every footstep echoed clearly in the cabin. Lieutenant Mark Halloran, the lead investigator on scene, began his work. He instructed everyone to stay in place, then signaled for the technician to ready the Kodak camera, the standard black and white roll film model used by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to document scenes. The first photos captured the full view of the deck: half-eaten meal, shattered bourbon bottle, cracked glass, sodden tablecloth. The dim light made the images blurry, but they still showed the chaos. Another technician sketched a hand-drawn diagram, marking each item's position: broken glass near the stairs, to the lower cabin, shawl 3 steps away, and the overturned chair right against the railing. Every detail was noted in pencil on the graph paper, with timestamps and wind direction annotations. Halloran inspected every nook around the stern railing. Dried water stains mingled with dark reddish-brown bourbon marks. He knelt down, using a cotton swab to collect a sample of the remaining liquid, placing it in a small glass vial labeled liquor sample. No blood, no signs of struggle. On the floor, faint shoe prints from rainwater, but not clear enough to determine size. When the technician tried to lift fingerprints from the broken bottle, they quickly discovered disappointment. The glass surface was completely wet, unable to retain prints. Another opened the locker for the ship's log, The brown leather-bound notebook sat in the desk drawer, the last entry reading, November 28, 1964, 1830, departed Canyon Dock. The writing stopped abruptly, with no record of the night of the disappearance. Eleanor asked Vaughn, "Who keeps the log?" The captain replied, "I do, but after dinner, Mr. Wade told me no need to log anymore." Eleanor paused for a few seconds, then noted in his notebook, "Ship's owner requested log cessation before the incident." Next, he conducted interviews with the 4 people on the boat. Vaughn was first. He recounted everything, his voice raspy after 2 sleepless nights. "They argued around 11:30. I heard the glass break, her scream, then silence. When I asked, Mr. Wade said everything was fine. I was afraid something was wrong, but I didn't dare disobey." Eleanor asked, "Was she drinking heavily?" "Yes, but she was still sober." The second was Richard Wade. He sat on the sofa, arms crossed, answering slowly. "Oh, we were having drinks. She was tense about the weather. I advised her to turn in early. When I went to the room, she wasn't there anymore. Maybe she went to secure the dinghy after hearing the banging." Eleanor pressed, "Are you sure you didn't hear anyone fall into the water?" "No, if I had, I would have known." The interview ended with nothing concrete gained. Christopher Dalton, Eleanor's co-star, was third. He said that during the argument, he was in the forward cabin, hearing loud noises, but not coming out to look. "I didn't want to intrude on their marital business." Eleanor eyed the young man, half believing. The last was a steward, newly hired to assist on the trip, who only confirmed hearing shouts, but seeing nothing. No cross-examinations of the statements, as Eleanor wanted to avoid conflict while everyone's nerves were frayed. As the midday sun slanted through, the tech team continued collecting evidence. The red coat was temporarily draped over the railing to dry, water dripping in streams. They photographed it from multiple angles, checking the cuffs and noting a small fray. A technician whispered, "Looks like it was grabbed and pulled." Vaughn overheard, his eyes darkening. But Eleanor only noted in the log, "Fray undetermined cause." In the guest cabin, the half-cracked glass still clung with bourbon residue. The technician wrapped it in cloth, sealing it with tape and twine. The broken bottle shards were gathered in a cardboard box, each piece numbered. No modern storage room or evidence bags like later years, everything was done by hand, careful, but crude. Eleanor circled the deck once more. The scene before him seemed restaged after chaos. Chair righted, cloth smoothed, only the heavy liquor scent and damp salt lingering in the air. He paced the railing, measuring the distance from the fallen chair's position to the edge, about 3 steps. If Eleanor had truly slipped, there should have been skid marks or grip traces, but nothing. Only a curved dry water streak, possibly from the spilled bottle. As the sun dipped low, work paused. Eleanor packed up, rolling the film into a tin box labeled Canyon Lake Incident. He gazed out at the serene lake, where the Splendor II's small dinghy still lay capsized on the shore. Desert wind blew through, carrying scents of metal and gasoline. Vaughn approached, saying softly, "Do you believe it was an accident, sir?" Eleanor didn't answer right away, just glancing toward Richard, leaning on the railing, eyes blankly fixed on the water. "I don't know," he replied quietly. "But there are things on this boat that don't add up." As he left the boat, Eleanor looked back once more. The evening light reflected off the wet railings, and where that light touched, something seemed to glint, a leftover glass shard, or a trace humans hadn't yet noticed. It was all captured in those silent black and white photos, seemingly meaningless, but many years later, they would become the first pieces revealing the truth buried in the depths of Canyon Lake. The next morning, in a makeshift office at the Canyon Lake dock, Lieutenant Eleanor spread out the notes and crime scene photos on a wooden table. The smell of coffee mingled with damp paper and the oily scent wafting from the lake into the small room. He reviewed the 3 completed statements, Dennis Vaughn, Christopher Dalton, and Richard Wade, then began reconstructing the timeline. The scribbled lines, hastily written in the night, now became the only pieces that might explain what happened on the Splendor II. Captain Vaughn's statement was recorded first. He recounted that around 11:30 p.m., after the wind picked up, he left the wheelhouse to check the anchor. Passing the guest cabin, he heard the Wades arguing. She yelled loudly, while he spoke very softly, almost growling. Then the glass broke. I asked if they needed help, but Mr. Wade said, "Get back to the wheelhouse, Dennis. It's fine." Halloran's question in the transcript, "What did you do next?" Vaughn replied, "I went on deck. I saw the lights dimming gradually, then silence. I didn't hear a splash, just the wind." By midnight, Vaughn said, he had checked again and discovered Eleanor missing, but Wade insisted she had just gone to bed or out for air. The final line in the statement made Halloran pause his pen. "I wanted to call the police right away, but he said no need. He ordered me not to call anyone." Christopher Dalton's statement was much shorter and vaguer. He said that evening, after dinner, he was in the forward cabin, reading a script and listening to music on a small radio. "I did hear them arguing, but not clearly. I didn't want to intrude on their private matters. When I went out on deck around midnight, I only saw the captain standing alone." Halloran pressed, "Did you hear objects falling, or anyone screaming?" Dalton shook his head. "No, just the rain." He insisted he saw or heard nothing unusual after that. Halloran's final note in the transcript, Dalton's position undetermined 11:30, 1 o'clock, claims no further knowledge. Richard Wade's statement was taken separately in the Splendor II's main cabin, mid-morning, as sunlight slanted through the damp window frames. He wore a heavy coat, eyes sunken, speaking slowly, and choosing his words carefully. Eleanor had a bit too much to drink. She was irritable about the weather, worried about the big waves. I advised her to go to bed, but she heard the dinghy banging against the hull and said she had to secure it. I sat in the lounge a few more minutes, then went to check, and she wasn't there. I thought she'd gone ashore." Halloran asked, "Did you hear a splash?" "No. If I had, I would have known. Maybe she slipped." He spoke in a chillingly calm voice, showing no emotion. When the three statements lay side by side, Halloran began spotting the gaps. According to Vaughn, the argument was at 11:30. According to Wade, it was just a brief talk before she went out around midnight. Dalton claimed he listened to music the whole time and saw nothing. The 90-minute window between 11:30 and 1 a.m. became a blank. No one could confirm. No independent witnesses, no chronometer, no signs of struggle on the boat, just rain, wind, and silence. Halloran called Vaughn back to clarify the exact time the lights went out. He frowned in recollection. "I'm not sure. Maybe around midnight. When I went back on deck, it was pitch black." While Richard said, "The lights stayed on until I called to report the missing person." The accounts contradicted completely. Halloran noted, "Time of lost contact, undetermined." He wondered, if the lights went out at midnight, why was the police call not made until 1:30? And why, as Vaughn said, did he have to get permission to report it? That noon, Halloran held a quick meeting with the officers in the patrol boat cabin. All physical evidence had been collected, scene photos taken, but nothing proved a crime had occurred. No body found, no blood, no direct witnesses. The county coroner's preliminary conclusion, no signs of assault. A young officer flipping through photos said, "If it was an accident, maybe she was drunk and slipped." Halloran didn't respond, just staring at the photo of the red coat hung on the mast. The cuff fabric frayed, a tiny detail he didn't yet know how to interpret. Late afternoon, Richard Wade signed the final transcript, confirming his statement. He left the boat, escorted to shore. Dalton went with him, silent. Vaughn stayed on the Splendor II to prepare towing it to dock. As darkness fell, only Halloran remained, gazing at the lake flat as a mirror. He knew the case couldn't go further without a body. In the legal system, no corpse meant no crime. And so the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office final report, typed on yellowed paper a few days later, could only end with a brief line, "No criminal act proven. Presumed lake accident." Out there, Canyon Lake remained as quiet as if it had never witnessed anything. But in Halloran's mind, the timeline gaps, the conflicting words, and that husband's chilling silence left an uncomfortable echo. He packed the files, turned off the light, and stepped outside, unaware he had just closed a case that would haunt him for life, and would be reopened nearly half a century later, when these statements were scrutinized, word by word. 3 days after the search ended, the yacht Splendor II was towed to Canyon Marina for a final inspection before returning to the owner. Lieutenant Halloran returned to the scene, accompanied by 2 forensics technicians from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. They had to finish the unfinished work, re-scanning every physical trace before the file officially closed. At that time, Arizona lacked modern sonar or bottom-scanning radar. Underwater searches relied entirely on divers and mechanical grappling hooks. Areas deeper than 30 feet were marked inaccessible. Many parts of the lakebed had never been checked, the murky, cold water making dives longer than 15 minutes hazardous. The rescue team halted when no further traces appeared, deeming it most likely the body had been swept away. In an internal memo, Halloran had once written, "If we had sonar, we could pinpoint sunken areas faster." But in 1964, that technology was a luxury reserved for the military. On the dock, the evidence was laid out on a long wooden table: shattered bourbon bottle, cracked glass, red coat, shawl, and a glass vial of the liquor sample. Halloran had swabbed from the deck that first night. Everything was wrapped in paper bags, taped shut, and hand-numbered with ink. No tamper-evident seals or independent verification. The county lab back then had only one chemist, mainly for analyzing blood in traffic accidents, lacking capacity for other compounds. The liquor sample was thus only noted: liquid with heavy liquor odor, no blood detected. A few weeks later, that vial was stored in a steel refrigerator, simply labeled Evidence 12B, Canyon Lake Incident. When the files were transferred, no one checked it again. Halloran stood on the deck, peering over the now dry steel railings. That night's rain had washed away all traces, leaving only faint rust spots. He shone a flashlight along the handrails, spotting a few small skid marks but not noting them in the report. At the time, detecting skids, grips, or drags on metal exceeded available equipment. No close-ups taken, no samples collected, and what might have been skids existed only in the investigator's memory. He paused at the stern deck section, where Vaughn had pointed, and remeasured the distance from the cabin door to the water's edge. Just over 3 steps. If someone had been pushed, there should have been impact marks, but nothing. No handprints, no hair, no fabric threads. Everything as if no one had ever fallen from there. In the forensics room, the technician wrote the summary report, just 2.5 pages long. The conclusion stated clearly: no signs of struggle or trauma from external force detected. No basis to determine criminal act. Those cold words, typed on an Olympia typewriter, later became the foundation for closing the case. Halloran read the report over and over, finding it unconvincing, but he had no evidence to rebut it. "Without a body, we can't prove anything," the deputy chief told him bluntly. In the end, Halloran was forced to sign off. In the afternoon, before wrapping up, the tech team packed the evidence for transfer to the central vault. It was placed in wooden crates, lined with newspaper, then roped shut. No sealed envelopes, no chain of custody forms. Back then, evidence storage procedures were provisional, just kept in the vault for a few years, until the case closed. The red coat was folded neatly, but never washed or fiber tested. The broken bottle and cracked glass stored together, causing the shards to rub and dull, rendering future fingerprint analysis impossible. All of Eleanor Wade's evidence, ultimately, was logged as Item 1321 in the vault ledger: Canyon Lake, lake accident. As Halloran left the dock, sunset dyed the water red. He paused to gaze out at the lake's center, where the last sunlight reflected off small ripples. He knew he didn't truly believe the accident hypothesis, but also understood he had nothing in hand to pursue further. No body, no independent witnesses, no support tools. It was all just intuition. He walked slowly to his car, carrying his sodden hat and a sense of incompletion. The steel vault door closed behind him, burying with it all the evidence, the glass shards, liquor sample, and red coat, lying dormant in the dark for nearly half a century, awaiting technology and a new generation of investigators capable of reopening what he had been forced to overlook. December 1964, Canyon Lake sank into stillness. After nearly 2 weeks of searching and combing, nothing new was found. The lake had returned to its characteristic deep green of Arizona winter, steady winds still blowing from the desert, but the docks lay deserted. The Splendor Thack was towed ashore for maintenance, and those who had been on that boat had departed, each carrying a piece of the fateful night. Police withdrew, the dive team ended its task. All that remained was a quiet space, as if no one had ever vanished here. Captain Dennis Vaughn was the one who stayed the longest. He spent a few more days cleaning the boat, working while quietly gazing at the water. In his mind, the sounds from that night still echoed, the crash of the glass, the wind whistling through the doorframe, and Eleanor's voice choking amid the rain. He couldn't forget the image of Richard Wade standing on the deck, flashlight in hand, but not shining it down into the water. She was afraid of water. She would never have left the boat on her own. Vaughn told an officer when the man came to retrieve the keys. The officer just nodded, saying nothing. They all knew, no body, and the case ended there. In the days that followed, Canyon Lake began welcoming tourists back. Locals still gossiped, some saying they'd seen strange lights on the lake the night Eleanor disappeared. Others claiming the strong winds had rocked the boat hard, causing her to slip and fall. No one was certain of anything, but every story ended with a shake of the head. Probably just an accident. At the time, no one thought a crime might have occurred. Richard Wade left Arizona almost immediately after the boat was returned to him. He appeared a few times in the Los Angeles press, giving interviews in a strangely calm voice. Eleanor loved the water. Maybe she wanted to stay with it. The media didn't dig deeper back then. They just published photos of him in black attire, hat in hand, standing by the lake shore on the day the search ended, his face sorrowful, eyes weary. But to Vaughn, that image wasn't real. He knew that look well, the gaze of the man who had tried to control everything on the boat, including the silence of others. By month's end, the Splendor Doe was moved to a shipyard in Tempe for repairs to the chipped paint. When technicians inspected the stern cabin, they found a few small dents on the metal railing, too faint to identify what caused them, possibly just wave impacts or something hard. No one reported those details. As the case was closed, police just reclaimed the keys, archived the files, then handed the boat back to the owner. The vessel left Canyon Lake one early morning, leaving behind the flat water and fading wakes. Vaughn returned home, resuming his work at the marina, but he never forgot that night. He became much quieter, avoiding mention of the Wade name. Whenever anyone asked, he only replied curtly, "Some things don't sink with the water." To him, the lake wasn't just a place of loss, but one that held secrets. Many months later, Richard Wade sold the Splendor Doe to a businessman in San Diego and vanished from Arizona. He started a new life. Old acquaintances said he quickly returned to acting, looking still like the perfect man audiences had once adored. No one mentioned Eleanor anymore. Television reran the films she'd starred in, viewers feeling a momentary pang before changing channels. To the public, she became a short-lived star, a sad anecdote from Hollywood's golden era. And in Arizona, Canyon Lake returned to peace. Each nightfall, the lake reflected the moonlight, still to the point of eeriness. Local boaters still spoke of the windy night of '64, when a woman vanished without a trace. To them, it was just a barroom tale. But in the deep darkness beneath that water, fragments of the truth still lay silent, waiting to be found. No one knew that, decades later, it would be from this very place that the accident presumed closed would be reopened. And this time, the lake would no longer hold its secrets. January 2010, nearly 46 years after Eleanor Wade's disappearance, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office storage basement was opened for the first time in years. The air in the room was thick with the smell of old paper and damp metal. Iron shelves covered in dust, each compartment holding dozens of file boxes coated with case numbers from the 60s. Detective Ralph Hernandez, a member of the Legacy Case Review Program, was in the midst of reviewing unsolved files. He was meticulous by nature, specializing in reviving dead cases with new technology to restore evidence. That day, as he scanned the 1964 catalog, his eye stopped at a faded ink line. Case hash 64-1129. Wade, Eleanor, presumed drowning. The name stirred a vague memory. He'd heard it mentioned in a seminar on famous disappearances without bodies. Hernandez pulled the file box from the shelf, blew off the dust, then opened the lid. Inside were 5 crumbling paper envelopes, a few rolls of black and white Kodak film, and an old wooden box sealed with twine. The label paper on the box had yellowed, the handwriting nearly illegible. As he broke the seal, the twine snapped, revealing inside the red coat, the shattered bourbon bottle, the cracked glass tumbler, and a small glass vial containing a light brown liquid. The faint scent of liquor still lingered. Hernandez jotted quickly in his notebook, evidence condition, relatively intact. He carefully transferred each item into new plastic bags, affixing tracking labels. Beside the box was the original case file, handwritten statements from Vaughn, Dalton, and Wade. He skimmed through, pausing at Halloran's 1964 note, "No body, no determination of criminal act." Under the weak fluorescent light, Hernandez sensed the frustration in every stroke of the pen, something undiscovered. That afternoon, he carried the entire evidence box to the Special Investigations Room. The Legacy Case Review Program had launched just months earlier, allowing retesting of old evidence with 3D imaging and fiber analysis technology. The forensics team received the evidence box as if opening a door to the past. Technicians did a preliminary check, confirming the coat sample was still viable for fiber structure analysis. They used a high-resolution camera to re-photograph every surface detail, magnifying the scratches on the cuffs and the fraying at the left shoulder. One specialist remarked, "These marks don't look like from a slip. They're from being pulled or gripped." The comment caught Hernandez's attention. He requested an expanded analysis scope, including the boat's metal railing material, preserved in the original photos. 3 days later, preliminary results came back. The 3D analysis showed the bruises in the digitized original forensics photos, scanned from the Kodak film, had asymmetrical shapes, concentrated on the left arm and shoulder, indicating external force impact, inconsistent with a natural fall mechanism. Simulation software modeling the scene, incorporating physical data on height and railing position, yielded, if the victim fell from slipping, bruises would concentrate on legs or hips. But here, all trauma is on the upper body. Hernandez sat silently staring at the 3D reconstruction image. The silhouette of a woman falling backward at an angle, arms raised in reflex, and a clear force from the front pushing hard into the left shoulder. He noted in his report, "Injuries inconsistent with accidental fall." For the first time in nearly half a century, Eleanor Wade's disappearance was no longer purely an accident. That night, with the office empty, Hernandez sat alone. The computer screen's glow lit his face, illuminating the black and white photo of Eleanor Wade, her delicate features, eyes seeming to look straight at the viewer. He played the old recording of Vaughn's statement, the trembling voice crackling through the outdated speaker. "I heard her scream. Then he told me not to call anyone." Those words, in the dim light of the file room, echoed like a call from the distant lake depths. Hernandez knew to proceed, he needed to re-interview surviving witnesses. He added a line to his notebook. "Verify status of Dennis Vaughn, Splendor II Captain." As he closed the file folder, he realized he'd unwittingly touched one of Arizona's most famous forgotten disappearances. The door locked since 1964 had cracked open, and what lay behind it might not just be the secret of one rainy night, but a truth buried deep for nearly half a century in Canyon Lake's heart. 10 days after Ralph Hernandez reopened the Eleanor Wade file, a strange coincidence occurred. While he was reviewing the original witness list, the local TV show Desert Mysteries aired a special episode on Arizona's unsolved disappearances. Amid the commercials, Hernandez saw on screen the face of an elderly man with silver hair, eyes sunken but alert. The caption below read, "Dennis Vaughn, Splendor the Second Yacht Captain, 1964 Disappearance Case." He immediately turned up the volume. In the frame, Vaughn sat facing the host, hands clasped, voice raspy but clear. "I can't take this secret to my grave anymore," he said. "I heard her scream. Then Richard Wade, told me not to call anyone," he said. "Nothing happened, Dennis. Just stay put," the host pressed. "Are you sure you didn't mistake that scream?" Vaughn looked straight into the camera, eyes welling. "I've worked on boats for 40 years. I know the difference between an argument and a cry of fear. That night, I heard her yell, 'No.' Then silence. I wanted to call the police, but he was right there staring at me, telling me not to." Hernandez nearly held his breath, hearing that. He noted the airtime and immediately reported to Lieutenant Maria Carina, head of the cold case unit. The two met the next morning in the briefing room. Carina watched the full clip, then nodded slightly. "This is an unreleased statement. If verified, we have grounds to officially reopen the file." Police contacted the TV station right away. The producer confirmed Vaughn had reached out a month prior, saying he wanted to tell everything before it was too late. He now lived in Prescott, Arizona, as a retired security guard in a nursing home. When the investigative team arrived, Vaughn was waiting in a small room overlooking the Granite Mountains. On the table was an old photo of the Splendor II from the 60s, sunlight speckling the frame's edges. He gave a faint smile, seeing Hernandez's badge. "I thought no one cared anymore," he said. "I've been waiting for you all these years." The interview lasted nearly 3 hours. Vaughn recounted more details than any prior document. He spoke of the glass shattering, Eleanor's scream, and the moment he reached for the radio to call for help when Richard Wade stopped him. He stepped out from the cabin, face flushed, eyes strange. "He told me not to turn on lights, not to tell anyone. I was scared. I heard the dinghy engine start, then stop. When I turned back, she was gone." Hernandez showed Vaughn the 1964 statement transcript. The old man stared at it long, then said softly, "They didn't record everything I said. I did mention the scream, but they omitted it. Back then, police just wanted to close the case. I didn't dare argue. Richard was powerful, famous. I was just a hired captain." Carina asked, "Do you recall the exact time the boat's lights went out?" Vaughn closed his eyes for a long moment, then replied, "Right after I heard the bottle break. Less than a minute later, all lights off. I think he flipped the main switch." That answer made both investigators exchange glances. Per the old transcript, Richard had said the lights stayed on until 1 a.m. when he called police. If Vaughn was truthful, the power outage happened at least an hour and a half earlier, a gap too wide, enough for anything to have occurred. After the meeting, Hernandez obtained a recording order and took a new statement. Vaughn signed with a trembling hand, eyes lighting with relief. "I've been silent too long," he said quietly. "That night wasn't an accident. I didn't see it, but I know what he did." Police returned to the Phoenix headquarters that very night. In the briefing room, Carina played the recording for the investigative team. Vaughn's voice came through raspy but firm. "He told me not to call anyone. I heard her scream." The room fell utterly silent. After nearly half a century, this was the first time a witness had spoken directly about the possibility of Eleanor Wade's murder. Hernandez laid out the two transcripts side by side, the 1964 one and the 2010 one, then underlined the differences. In the old one, Vaughn only mentioned hearing noises and lights out. In the new one, he affirmed hearing her scream and he turned off the lights. The light switch detail was the breakthrough. When cross-referenced with the boat's electrical log, noting the lighting system cut off at 11:47 p.m., the truth became clear. Vaughn's statement matched the technical data while Richard Wade's did not. Carina stared at the Canyon Lake map on the wall, her red pen pausing midair. "If the lights went out then," she said. "Eleanor could have been dead at least an hour before Richard called to report her missing." No one in the room said another word. They all understood the implication of that number. The 1964 lake accident was now officially a criminal investigation. As he left the room, Hernandez paused to look at the black and white photo of Eleanor on the old file cover. She smiled faintly, eyes bright as if still gazing toward the camera. He thought silently, perhaps for the first time in 46 years, that smile had a real chance to come back into the light. And somewhere amid Canyon Lake's red cliffs, the secret the water once hid was beginning to surface from the depths. A week after Dennis Vaughn's recorded confession, the Maricopa County Cold Case Unit officially launched the next step, full scene reconstruction on Canyon Lake. It was a clear winter morning, early mist veiling the water, mirroring the scene over 40 years prior, when Eleanor Wade vanished. Ralph Hernandez stood on the dock, gazing toward the distant red cliffs, casting shadows on the flat lake. In his hand was a photocopy of the Splendor II's logbook, yellowed paper with the clear entry. "Anchored near East Ridge, 1830, wind southwest, moderate." From this data, the technical team began reconstructing the yacht's position using 1964 estimated coordinates. The sheriff's office coordinated with the Arizona Department of Public Safety (DPS), bringing in a new generation sonar model mounted on a specialized survey boat. Beside them was a team of engineers from the Phoenix Institute of Technology, tasked with building a 3D model of the entire area using past meteorological and current data. In the temporary control room on the dock, screens displayed sonar waves traversing layers of underwater terrain. Each pang sound illuminated a piece of the past. Karina stood beside Hernandez, tracking the sonar trace emerging deep lakebed, uneven bottom, interspersed with mud strips and thick limestone layers. She said softly, "This is the area Vaughn said he saw the small dinghy drifting the next morning." Hernandez nodded, marking the coordinates in red pen. The current was simulated southwest, incorporating the November 28, 1964 weather records. Data showed if an object fell from the boat around 11:45 p.m., it would drift southeast across the lake, then sink to about 40 feet deep. The very zone they were now scanning. After 2 hours of sonar sweeping, the screen suddenly displayed an anomalous reflective mass at 12 meters depth, about 2.3 meters long, with clear wooden structure. The technician zoomed in, tapping the keyboard lightly. Likely man-made object. Hernandez leaned in, heart beating faster. The blurry shape on screen, curved, narrow with a rounded bow, looked exactly like a small dinghy. He turned to Karina. "If this is the Splendor II's dinghy, we've found the first physical evidence since 1964. Immediately, the area was cordoned with marker buoys. The DPS dive team prepped recovery gear, scuba tanks, helmet-mounted cameras, and depth sensor anchor lines. Each diver was specially trained for underwater evidence recovery, every movement slow to avoid stirring silt that could drop visibility to near zero. A light breeze stirred the lake, rippling the surface. Faint sunlight pierced the mist, reflecting off distant red cliffs, tinting the scene in coppery gray. Hernandez addressed the team, "We're not just looking for a dinghy. We're recovering the missing piece of the truth." He knew the weight of this moment. If that object was indeed the lost dinghy, it might hold traces the water hadn't erased, fabric fibers, impact marks, or even small bones still lodged. The lead diver, a veteran named Morales, entered the water first. Bubbles hissed white on the deep green surface. Hernandez watched via live feed from the helmet camera. Below, light was dim, dark silt columns rising with each motion. After minutes, the dinghy's shape sharpened, wood covered in moss and sand, hull cracked in two. Morales gently brushed silt away, revealing a faded green paint patch with Splendor II, AZ. His voice crackled over the radio, confirmed. "This is their dinghy." The control room went still. Karina gripped the table edge, while Hernandez stood frozen, eyes glued to the screen. After 46 years, The first evidence from the disappearance had risen from the lake. Morales continued panning the camera, filming the surrounding area. Near the bow, he spotted a small light brown object. He picked it with tweezers, placing it in a water-filled bag, a frayed fabric scrap, still faintly red, matching Eleanor's coat. Beneath the dinghy bottom, a small cylindrical white object, half buried in mud. Morales leaned close, carefully retrieving it. Under the light, all recognized it, a bone fragment. "We stop here," Hernandez said, over the radio. "Secure the scene. Prep safe recovery." The dive team attached flotation buoys around the site, logging precise GPS, 33° 32'41". N, 111° 26'03". W. The dinghy was left in situ for recovery the next morning when light conditions improved. As afternoon fell, the lake grew strangely still. Hernandez sat by the dock edge, watching the yellow buoys bob glinting on the water. He felt both the investigators' thrill of nearing truth and a chill at what might still lie in those depths. Karina approached, handing him a hot coffee. "Do you think this is the end?" she asked. He shook his head slightly. "No, this is the real beginning." The next morning, as sunlight hit the thin mist, the DPS team returned. They used a hydraulic crane to hoist the object from 40 feet deep. Water dripped from the cracked wooden hull, mud spilling sides, revealing the frame with unusual dents on the starboard side, round, deep impacts, possibly from heavy collision. The red fabric scrap and bone fragment were rushed to Phoenix's forensics lab for DNA analysis. On shore, Hernandez stood motionless watching. In his mind echoed Vaughn's interview words, "Lights out," then she was gone. Now, what they held wasn't hypothesis. The dinghy, fabric, bone fragment, all real solid evidence, as if after nearly half a century, the lake had finally yielded the secret it once guarded. And for Ralph Hernandez, the Eleanor Wade case was no longer a drowning, but a murder concealed in Canyon Lake's still waters. That morning, Canyon Lake was nearly flat calm, only faint ripples reflecting the early sunlight. The Arizona DPS recovery team began work in silence. Every action precisely calculated. As the steel cable tautened, a thin black mud layer surfaced, releasing the musty stench of stagnant water, stirred after nearly half a century. Inch by inch, the small dinghy's hull emerged from the water, wood-rotted, paint flaking in patches, but shape intact, rounded bow, narrow stern. Once aboard, light glinted off the faded Splendor tug, AZ lettering on the starboard side, leaving no doubt this was the dinghy that vanished the night Eleanor Wade fell into the lake in 1964. The dinghy was placed on a steel cradle, water dripping through cracked planks. A technician leaned down, shining a light along the strakes, where something was wedged between wood layers. He tweezed out a dark scrap, mud and rust-stained brown-black. After a quick lake water rinse, the fibers emerged clear, thick wool weave, deep red. Hernandez recognized it immediately, same material as the coat Eleanor wore that evening. The scrap was laid on clean plastic, covered with a glass box, photographed from every angle. The air around grew hushed, only camera clicks and wind whistling through the tin roof remaining. As the technical team prepared to scan the dinghy's underbelly, a soft call rang out. "There's something here." Everyone's eyes turned to Morales, who was kneeling by the starboard side, flashlight in hand. In the fine silt mixed with moss, he discovered a small ivory-colored object. Under the light, its shape was unmistakable. A bone fragment, thin but solid, with a slightly curved end. Morales silently placed it in the collection tray. No one spoke. Hernandez just stood still, his gaze fixed on that tiny object, the first piece of a body swallowed by the water for nearly half a century. The entire area was immediately cordoned off. The technical team planted marker buoys, logging the coordinates, while waiting for the specialized transport vehicle to arrive and take the samples to the lab. Hernandez and Karina paced the search area, trying to envision the 1964 moment. If this dinghy had truly drifted from the Splendor II yacht, it must carry traces of the impact. Karina knelt down, pointing to a deep dent on the starboard side, about 3 inches in diameter, with charred edges. "This couldn't be from waves hitting rocks," she said. "It's round and indented inward. It looks like someone struck it hard from the outside with a solid object." Hernandez nodded. He recalled Vaughn's words. "I heard the glass break, then something heavy falling to the floor." Perhaps this blow was the last thing Eleanor felt before falling from the boat. As the transport vehicle drove away, they stood by the dock watching it go. No one said it aloud, but in their hearts they all understood. Everything just found, the fabric scrap, the dinghy, the bone fragment, was the end of the accident hypothesis. That night, Eleanor didn't fall on her own. She was pushed into the water, and this dinghy might be where it happened. A few days later, when the DNA results came back, all final doubts vanished. The bone sample matched Eleanor's mother's DNA on file, in civil records, perfectly. Hernandez read the report without a word. He just silently looked out the window, where afternoon light streamed through Phoenix's buildings, then turned to Karina. She was still there, right under the lake, all those years. Canyon Lake immediately became a new crime scene. Police strung yellow tape along the eastern dock, barring all tourist boats from the area. The marker buoys drifted idly on the water, like silent notes in a melancholy tune from the past. Curious locals gathered to watch, many recalling the old story, the famous actress who vanished on a rainy night. The case closed too quickly. This time, when images of the dinghy aired on TV, the public seemed to understand that the truth had never truly sunk. In the late afternoon, Hernandez returned to the lakeshore alone. He sat on the wooden steps, gazing down at the crystal-clear blue water. There, just a few meters away, was where they'd found the dinghy, the surviving fragment of a murder. He thought of Vaughn, the trembling old man on TV, and of Eleanor, the young woman swept away into the darkness. He turned off the lights, Hernandez said softly, as if speaking to the lake. The lights went out, and she was never seen in the light again. In the distance, lights from the police station reflected on the water, twinkling like scattered memory fragments surfacing. Desert wind blew through, carrying dampness and the scent of old wood, as if reminding that some secrets can't be buried forever. Canyon Lake had finally given back what it had held too long, and with it, Eleanor Wade's disappearance officially became a murder. In the dim room of the Arizona State Forensic Center, pale blue light from a row of screens illuminated the aged black and white photos. These were the Kodak film rolls that Lieutenant Mark Halloran had shot on that final night of 1964, when Eleanor Wade was still listed as missing presumed accident. Now, nearly half a century later, they were digitized with specialized scanners, every silver halide grain restored in detail. Ralph Hernandez stood with the technical team, silently watching as the first image appeared: the Splendor deck, shattered bottle, overturned chair, sodden tablecloth. The slant of the old police flashlight cast a shadow in one corner, highlighting the dark pool of liquor, and from there, the journey to reconstruct the truth began. The forensic imaging engineer used reverse lighting software to identify the source. The light was offset 27 degrees from the deck axis, indicating the photographer's shadow leaned left. When they zoomed into the frame's center, strange dark streaks appeared under the wooden floor, not from water, but from a heavy object dropped forcefully. This data matched Vaughn's account that he slammed something to the floor before the lights went out. The next photo showed the tablecloth dragged askew, the cracked glass tumbler. Every trivial detail was now processed with modern algorithms, forming an overall picture that no one in 1964 had the capability to read. The most crucial part was the 4 forensic photos of Eleanor's body when it was recovered. The old film was yellowed, but restoration software recreated natural tones. When the lighting was balanced, bruised skin areas emerged clearly, concentrated on the left arm, shoulder, and rib cage. Forensic pathologist Dr. Helen Westcott, overseeing the analysis, pointed to the screen. Look at the bruise spread direction. Blood pooled downward before the body sank, meaning the trauma occurred while she was still alive. Hernandez nodded. That statement confirmed what he'd long suspected. Eleanor didn't die from falling into the water. She'd been struck hard before that. The forensics team built a 3D model of the body from the photos. Each bruise was color-coded, red for pre-death trauma, blue for post-submersion damage. When the model was complete, results showed a sequence of impacts concentrated along the left shoulder and wrist, directed front to back, perfectly matching the boat railing position. Westcott explained, if it were just an accident, bruises would appear on the hip or knee from contact with the deck during a slip. But here, the force originated from the front, as if someone pushed or gripped hard, then flung her down. She zoomed into the left shoulder, pointing to an elongated dark streak in parallel lines, the hallmark of human hand pressure. This is a grip mark, a hand clenched tight, impossible if she'd fallen alone. Meanwhile, the toxicology team reopened the remaining liquor sample in the glass vial Halloran had collected. The aged liquid was separated with new spectroscopic techniques, yielding results dozens of times more precise than 1964's manual analysis. The outcome was surprising. The alcohol concentration was only equivalent to 0.02%, far below the level causing imbalance. That meant Eleanor wasn't drunk as once claimed. If not intoxicated, the possibility of her falling on her own completely collapsed. Hernandez leaned against the table, silently watching the restored images rotate on screen. Pale face, dark bruises on skin, arms curled in defensive reflex. He felt a lump in his throat. For all those years, she'd lain under the water labeled an accident, simply because the technology of the time couldn't speak for her. Now, every bruise, every light detail in the old photos was telling the story in its own way. The specialists finalized the 3D simulation, a model integrating all data: the yacht's position, wind direction, deck tilt, railing height, positions of Richard Wade and Eleanor per statements. When they reconstructed the altercation moment, the software output, a push force from a man over 1.8 m tall impacting the left shoulder of the angled standing woman, causing backward imbalance. Her arm reached for the railing, leaving characteristic bruises. In 0.8 seconds, she fell from the deck, struck the dinghy's side, then sank. Every fact matched the injury patterns and the dents found on the just recovered dinghy. Karina stood behind, almost whispering, "It matches every detail." Hernandez just nodded, his eyes hardening. No room left for the accident hypothesis. He looked up at the screen, where the 3D push model replayed slowly, frame by frame, the man's hand gripping the woman's shoulder, deck light reflecting on the water surface, then the falling figure vanishing into the night. When the analysis session ended, Dr. Westcott only noted briefly in the final report, "Pattern of assault confirmed," but to Hernandez and Karina, that short phrase carried the weight of nearly half a century's weight. They stepped out of the room, evening desert wind blowing through the hallway, carrying scents of metal and ozone from the humming scanners. Hernandez paused by the window frame, gazing at the dark sky over Phoenix. Out there somewhere, the man once seen as a victim of marital tragedy had now become a suspect in a perfectly concealed murder. And beneath Canyon Lake's depths, artificial sonar light still swept every square meter of water, illuminating small ripples. After 46 years, the 1964 black and white photos had finally spoken, and this time, they didn't just recount an accident, but evidence of a murder staged with silence and darkness. In the small meeting room of the Phoenix Special Investigations Unit, fluorescent lights cast down on the wooden table where 3 photocopies of the 1964 statements lay side by side. Ralph Hernandez and Lieutenant Karina had read them dozens of times, but this time, every detail carried a different meaning, because now they had what 1964 police didn't: physical evidence and forensic science, confirming Eleanor Wade didn't die by accident. 3 files, 3 voices, and one chillingly unified truth gradually emerging. Captain Dennis Vaughn's statement was placed first. He said he'd heard the argument around 11:30, followed by the glass breaking and Eleanor yelling, "No," then silence. When Vaughn reached for the radio to call for help, Richard Wade appeared, telling him, "Don't call anyone." In the 2010 recording, Vaughn confirmed an additional detail he'd previously not dared mention. Right after the crash, all boat lights went out. Electrical analysis from the logbook proved this. The main breaker tripped at exactly 11:47 p.m., matching Vaughn's recalled timeline perfectly. Christopher Dalton's statement, the co-star with Eleanor in the unfinished film, was different. He claimed to be in the forward cabin listening to music and unaware of anything, only going out after the lights went out. But forensics determined from the forward cabin position, he could easily have heard loud noises or screams in the guest cabin. Acoustic mapping simulation showed echoes on a small yacht like the Splendor II, sufficient for the argument to carry clearly. Dalton claiming he heard nothing could mean avoidance of involvement, not wanting to face witness responsibility. The third statement was Richard Wade's, the husband and sole remaining suspect. He claimed his wife went to secure the dinghy line after hearing it bang against the hull, and when he returned, she was gone. But current forensics proved the dinghy wasn't released by hand. Knots in the original photos showed they remained in professional sailor ties. Eleanor, without maritime skills, couldn't have untied them herself. Additionally, forensics identified the dinghy impacted hard from the starboard outside, direction completely opposite to where Eleanor would need to go if just securing the line. Karina pushed Wade's statement to the table's center. "It all hinges on the lights out moment," she said. Hernandez nodded, opening the screen displaying the reconstructed timeline. 11:32 p.m., Vaughn hears argument. 11:45, bottle breaks. 11:47, full power outage. 11:50, complete silence. Over an hour and a half later, 1:30 a.m., Wade calls police. "This 100-minute gap," Karina said, "is where the murder happened." From 3D simulation data, they knew Eleanor was pushed from the front, force from someone 15-20 centimeters taller than her, exactly Wade's height. Shoulder and wrist bruises matched human hand pressure perfectly. Added to the DNA from the red fabric scrap and bone matching Eleanor's mother, no doubt remained. She'd been assaulted before falling into the water. Hernandez replayed the 2010 interview audio, Vaughn's trembling voice rising. "He told me not to turn on lights, not to call anyone. Then I heard something heavy fall, like someone hitting metal. Compared to the yacht's technical blueprint, that spot matched the stern railing, right where the dent was found on the 2010 recovered dinghy. When combining all data, audio, timing, lighting and body trauma, the full action sequence emerged clear as slow-motion film. Wade in rage smashes bottle, argument escalates, lights out, a hard push, then silence. Karina lifted Eleanor's photo, placing it beside the witness position map. Only 3 people left on the boat, Wade, Dalton and Vaughn. Dalton in forward cabin, Vaughn on bridge deck, only Wade in the guest cabin with Eleanor. She paused, voice deliberate. He was the last to see her alive. Silence stretched in the meeting room, only the steady hum of the ventilation fan. Hernandez closed his eyes, envisioning the deck scene, lights off, rain pattering, the push unbalancing Eleanor to fall onto the small dinghy, slamming the starboard side, then sinking slowly in cold water. No cry for help, no lights on, no call for aid. Wade sat back in the dark, calmly waiting for the waves to swallow the final sound. When Hernandez opened his eyes, he saw Karina looking at him. "We have enough," she said. He nodded, voice deepened. "Yes, every piece fits." Vaughn witnessed in silence. Dalton evaded. And Wade, he's the final link. Outside, late afternoon sun slanted through the glass, casting shadows of thick file stacks on the wall. In that light, the timeline of one 1964 night, the night the lights went out on the Splendor II, was finally fully illuminated. In the following week, the Maricopa County Cold Case Office operated nearly around the clock. On Lieutenant Karina's desk was a thick stack of documents digitized forensics photos, 3D analysis reports, Dennis Vaughn's updated statement, and all confirmed lab data from the Phoenix Forensic Lab. Ralph Hernandez sat opposite, reviewing every page in the evidence summary. He read each item aloud, voice low and firm. Bruises prove front impact, low alcohol level, 3D model matches, push force. Witness heard scream and lights out, power cutoff timing, aligns with assault. He paused, looking up at Karina. No gaps left, this is probable cause. Karina nodded. They needed to prove to the court that all elements, statements, physical evidence, and timeline facts unified in one direction. Richard Wade caused his wife's death on the night of November 28, 1964. The 32-page summary was finalized, key sections highlighted in red pen, forensic confirmation, witness confession, reconstructed timeline, photographic evidence of assault. Before submission, Karina reread the conclusion, based on physical evidence, forensic science, and direct witness testimony, we have reasonable grounds to determine Richard Wade as the primary suspect in the murder of Eleanor Wade. On the morning of December 14, 2010, Hernandez and Karina entered the Maricopa County Courthouse with the file in hand. The courtroom air was so quiet, only the wall clock ticked. Judge Harold Connors, who'd served over 30 years in the field, read every line carefully, eyes moving slowly over the printed 1964 film images. When he reached the 3D push simulation photo, he looked up at the two. "Are you certain of the evidence integrity?" Karina replied concisely. "Yes, Your Honor. All DNA samples, lighting data, and witness files independently verified." Connors nodded, signing the final page. The court's red stamp thudded down, the thump echoing in the room. The arrest warrant for Richard Wade was official. Case hash 104712. Charge, homicide. Eleanor Wade, 1964. That afternoon, in the cold case office, the team silently watched the faxed warrant print out. It was the result of 46 years' wait, of once meaningless evidence fragments, now connected into a complete story. Hernandez folded the paper, slipping it into his coat pocket. "We'll do this by the book," he said. "No fanfare, no press." County Police coordinated with the Scottsdale PD, where Richard Wade lived in a small villa in the Camelback East neighborhood. At 79, he lived with his second wife, rarely went out, occasionally attending charity events for the arts community. The plan was discreet: 2 agents surveilling the area from dawn, 1 patrol car parked 3 blocks away, and the arrest team in plain clothes. Everyone understood this wasn't just a criminal case, it was arresting an old Hollywood icon, once seen as the tragic widower. As dusk settled over Scottsdale, Hernandez sat in the car, peering through binoculars at the 2-story house with its white porch. Inside, golden light spilled through the living room window, the shadow of an old man moving slowly. "Target in position," the radio officer whispered. Karina replied, "Wait for signal. When he steps out for mail, we move." At 5:42 p.m., Richard Wade opened the door, stepping down the stone path, wooden cane in hand. 2 agents approached, Hernandez in front, voice firm but calm. "Mr. Richard Wade, Maricopa County Police. We have a warrant for your arrest on first-degree murder charges related to the death of Eleanor Wade in 1964. The old man froze, eyes flooding with surprise, or perhaps fear. "What the hell? After 40 years, he murmured. Karina held the warrant out, voice unchanged. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." The handcuffs clicked shut with a dry snap amid Scottsdale's quiet afternoon. Neighbors peeked through curtains, a few recognizing the familiar face once on screens, now bowed between 2 young officers. As the police car rolled away, the final sunset stretched long over palm-shaded streets. After 46 years, the name Wade was finally rewritten, not on movie posters, but on an official arrest warrant for murder. 6:30 a.m. A thin mist still veiled Scottsdale's sky. The villas on East Chaparral Road remained hushed, palm shadows falling on dew-wet stone paths. In the black SUV parked 2 blocks away, The Maricopa County Sheriff's tactical team received the radio order. Target inside the house. Proceed. Ralph Hernandez sat in the front passenger seat, eyes fixed straight through binoculars on the white two-story villa. Behind, Lieutenant Karina reviewed the warrant one last time. Voice low, stick to protocol, no advance press leak. He's still a public figure. The team nodded, doors opening in unison. No one said another word. The iron gate swung open silently, only gravel crunching softly under boots. 2 agents advanced to the front door, the third circling to the backyard, ready to block escape routes. Hernandez stood center, knocking hard 3 times on the wooden door. Inside, no stir. He knocked again, louder. Mr. Richard Wade, this is Maricopa County Police. We have an arrest warrant for you. A neighbor's dog barked wildly, then the door flew open. A middle-aged woman, Wade's current wife, opened it, face ashen. He's in the living room, she whispered. The team entered, guns holstered. In the spacious room, Richard Wade sat in an armchair, gray robe on, coffee cup in hand. He looked at them calmly, eyes showing no emotion. Hernandez stepped forward, reading clearly word for word. Mr. Richard Wade, you are under arrest for first-degree murder in connection with the death of Eleanor Wade on the night of November 28, 1964. Karina continued, voice steady and firm. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Wade set the coffee cup down, lifting his head to meet Hernandez's gaze directly. What did you find after all these years? A rotted dinghy and a few bone scraps? You can't prove I did anything. His voice didn't tremble, but was even and slow, as if prepared for this moment long ago. Hernandez didn't reply, just retrieving the cuffs, saying softly, I'm sorry, Mr. Wade. It's time for the court to hear the rest of the story. As the steel cuffs closed, the click echoed dryly in the silent space. Wade didn't resist. He stood slowly, shuffling out the door between 2 officers. Karina glanced around the living room. Walls hung with old photos, 60s movie posters all featuring his youthful face. On the table, a frame of him and Eleanor, on their wedding day, smiles radiant. She set the frame down gently, eyes flickering with sadness. Everything he tried to hold on to, in the end, was just memories of the dead. She murmured to Hernandez. As Wade was escorted to the car, the second investigative team entered to search the house. They combed through the study, library, basement. No new evidence found. All files and documents related to the Splendor II had been destroyed or sold years ago. The house was too clean, too orderly, as if everything ever connected to Eleanor had been erased from his life long before. When they reached the yard, Wade looked up at the tall palms, morning light illuminating his gaunt face. Neighbors began gathering across the street, many recognizing him, the veteran actor once celebrated, now led away in handcuffs. A few camera flashes sparked, but police quickly blocked them. Wade said nothing more, just turned his head toward Karina, his gaze cold and weary. You can't change the past, Lieutenant, she replied curtly, but we can do right by the truth. The SUV doors closed, the engine roared to life. Hernandez sat in the front seat, glancing in the rearview mirror to see Wade sitting silently in the back row, eyes distant. As the car left the neighborhood, early morning sunlight reflected off his handcuffs, glinting briefly before fading. Outside, Scottsdale remained peaceful, as if nothing had happened. But in the heart of everyone in the car, they all understood. After 46 years, the fog shrouding the Eleanor Wade case had finally begun to lift. The third-floor interrogation room at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office held only a steel table, 3 chairs, and white light beaming down like a taut wire amid the silence. At 9 a.m., Richard Wade was led in, hands still cuffed, but eyes eerily calm. He sat down, arms crossed, glancing at the 2-way mirror ahead, as if long accustomed to lenses. Karina opened her leather notebook, while Hernandez placed an unopened water bottle in front of him. Mr. Wade, he began, voice even and low, This is the first interrogation since your arrest. You have the right to remain silent, but we encourage you to tell the truth. Everything you say will be recorded." Wade shrugged. "I understand. I've played a cop before." The interrogation lasted nearly 6 hours. At first, Wade maintained a cold demeanor, answering briefly. That night she was drunk. It was raining. She heard the dinghy banging, stepped out, slipped. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Karina looked him straight in the eye. "You said she was drunk, but we've reanalyzed the liquor sample. Alcohol level, nearly 0. And the boat railing has grip marks, not skid marks. How do you explain that?" Wade's lips curled slightly, eyes icy. "You're turning an accident into a crime. I loved her. I didn't kill anyone." Hernandez pulled out the 3D simulation photo, placing it on the table. The model showed the deck angle, blood streaks and fall trajectory. "If it was an accident," he said, "the body would fall toward the port side. But she fell to starboard, hitting the small dinghy, the dent we found." He rotated the image, voice firm as steel. "There's only one way that happens. Someone pushed her." Wade fell silent, eyes fixed on the photo, for seconds before leaning back in his chair, sighing. "I don't remember. That night was chaos. Maybe I lost my temper. But she slipped. I swear she slipped." Karina leaned in closer, voice hardening. "You say she slipped, but why was the power cut exactly then? Vaughn says you turned off the lights." Wade gave a dry laugh. "He's old. Over 40 years, memories change." "No," Hernandez replied. "Memories fade, but voltage doesn't lie. The technical log shows the breaker was manually tripped, not from rain or malfunction. Someone deliberately turned off the lights." The air in the room thickened. Wade no longer looked at the two, but down at the table, fingers tapping lightly in rhythm. "I don't want to say more." Karina slowly pushed forward another stack of photos, the digitized Kodak films from 1964. "See this? Bruises on the left shoulder, wrist and ribs. Forensics concludes hand pressure marks, impossible from a natural fall. She was gripped tight." Wade looked up, eyes darkening. "You really think those computers can replace human memory?" Karina didn't blink. "No, but we believe in physics and DNA." A long silence. The wall clock ticked like counting breaths. Then Wade let out a small, raspy laugh. "You think finding a few bone scraps, a few blurry photos lets you charge me? She's been underwater 40 years. There's nothing left." Hernandez leaned forward slightly, meeting his gaze. "Wrong. We've found the coat fabric and first bone fragment, and if there's more, we'll find it." Wade pressed his hands on the table, eyes flashing like a knife. "You'll never find her. Not in Canyon Lake. Not anywhere." That statement made Karina pause her pen. His tone wasn't that of an innocent man, but someone asserting something with absolute certainty. She glanced at Hernandez. Their eyes met, both understanding. Wade had just inadvertently admitted Eleanor's body was still somewhere unfound. Karina shifted tactics, lowering her voice. "Richard, if it really was an accident, why didn't you call police right then? Why wait over an hour and a half?" Wade stayed silent. Hernandez pressed. "Because you needed time to hide the body." The old man whipped around, voice cold as steel. "I didn't hide anything. I'm not a monster. But you know where she fell, don't you?" Karina pushed. Wade didn't answer, just stared blankly at the wall. 6 hours passed. Outside, Phoenix drizzle tapped the window glass. In the room, only steady breaths and pen scratches remained. Finally, Karina closed the file, standing. "We're stopping here. You can see your lawyer." Hernandez gave Wade one last look, saying softly, "She didn't deserve to die in the dark like that, and you know it." Wade turned away, murmuring almost a whisper, "She was afraid of water, and now she's under it. That's fair enough." As the two investigators stepped out, Karina paused in the hallway, voice low. "He said you'll never find her. He knows where the body's hidden." Hernandez gripped the file tight. "Then we'll find it. Until the lake tells the rest." And in the thin rain outside, both knew the investigation wasn't over, because what they needed now wasn't a confession, but Eleanor's intact body, the final proof to lock tight Richard Wade's inescapable past. 3 days after the first interrogation, with the atmosphere at the Maricopa Sheriff's Office still taut as a wire, the duty officer knocked lightly on Karina's door. "Lieutenant Richard Wade wants to see you. He says he has more to confess." The words made Karina look up immediately. Beside her, Ralph Hernandez set aside his stack of files, exchanging a skeptical glance. "He's changing tune that fast?" she replied curtly. "Men like Wade only speak when they think they're controlling the story. Let's see what he wants." This interrogation room was prepared more quietly. No obvious recording equipment, just 2 investigators and the suspect. Wade entered, no longer defiant as before. He sat down slowly, hands flat on the table, eyes dull but alert. Karina began, "What do you want to say?" Wade hesitated a moment, then gave a faint, raspy laugh. "I think you won't ever stop. So maybe it's time." The room fell silent. Hernandez pressed the record button, the red light blinking. Wade took a deep breath, then spoke slowly, words slipping through gritted teeth. "She didn't drown out there, not right away. I pulled her out of the water. She was hurt. I thought she was dead, but she wasn't." He paused, eyes fixed on the cold metal table. "She looked at me once more, tried to say something, then she stopped breathing. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Karina said nothing, just tilting her head, eyes sharp. Wade continued, voice fading. "I hid her. There's a cove east of the marina, behind the red cliffs. Nobody goes there. It's shallow in summer, deep in winter. I wrapped her in nylon from the maintenance tarp. I weighed it down with a propeller chain." The words made Hernandez freeze, his heart tightening. "You're saying Eleanor's body is still in Canyon Lake?" he asked, voice strained. Wade just nodded. "Yes, you'll find her in the cove east of the marina, about 300 meters from where the dinghy was found." Immediately, Karina signaled the technician to take notes. The first line recorded, "Suspect indicates burial site east of Canyon Lake Marina, coordinates approximate." No more needed, they had the location. Wade leaned back in his chair, exhaling softly, as if shedding a burden. "I never meant for it to go that far," he said quietly. "It was supposed to be just a fight." Karina replied in icy tones, "But it ended with a body hidden under water for nearly half a century." That afternoon, the Arizona DPS Special Sonar Team was dispatched to Canyon Lake. The sky was thick gray, light wind rippling the water. Technicians set up 360-degree scanning equipment, while Karina and Hernandez stood on the command boat deck, holding the old map against Wade's provided coordinates. "If he's telling the truth," Karina said. "The body's right east of the dinghy area, behind the limestone ridge. That spot's rarely visited." Hernandez replied, "About 25-30 feet deep, enough to keep everything submerged all those years." The steady ping sounds from the sonar echoed, displaying circular acoustic waves on screen. At first, just mud and rock. Then at minute 23, the technician suddenly called out, "Anomalous reflection. Size about 1.6 meters, irregular shape, with a parallel object adjacent." Hernandez stepped forward, seeing clearly the blurry human-shaped mass lying on its side, next to a chain of metal glinting in the silt. "Hit," he said softly. "Send down the dive team." 2 DPS divers, carrying cameras and preservation bags, descended along guidelines. The screen showed dark water, laced with fine sand. When the light swept across, the team nearly held their breath. Amid the mud was an old nylon bundle, wrapped around a human-shaped object. The head still had a distinct skull frame, black hair matted in strands, and rusted metal chain draped across the chest. "Morales," the dive lid, radioed, body intact. "Nylon mostly decomposed. We're bringing her up." On the lake surface, as the containment bag was lifted from the water, all fell silent. No one spoke, only wind whistling through the cliffs, and the soft hum of the rescue boat engine. Hernandez looked down at the water-heavy sealed bag, face tense enough that Karina could hear his breathing clearly. "Nearly 300 meters, he said." Just like he said, the body was rushed to the Arizona State Forensics Lab. When the nylon was unwrapped, Inside was the intact skeleton, joints still in natural position, indicating submersion right after death, before external decay. Beside the wrist bone was a silver chain with a heart pendant, engraved EW. Letters that, at a glance, Hernandez knew confirmed they'd truly found Eleanor. DNA results confirmed completely. The bone sample matched Eleanor Wade's genetic profile 100%. The forensics report added a detail that stunned everyone: a clean break on the left rib bone, indicating heavy impact force before death, matching the dinghy's dent shape. Not just pushed into the water, she'd been struck before that. When the news reached the command room, Karina stood silently for a long time gazing at the misty lake. Wind blew through, small waves rippling like slow breaths of the departed. "She was here all 46 years, she said softly. Hernandez replied, voice deep, "And now she's silent no more." At the Phoenix Detention Center, at the same time, Richard Wade sat alone in his cell, hands clenched, head bowed. When the guard entered with the news, "They've found her," he didn't look up, just whispered almost unconsciously, "I told you, she never left me." At Canyon Lake, yellow tape strung up once more, but this time no longer a disappearance. It was where justice had finally touched the truth, and where Eleanor's voice, though long gone, had been spoken for by the lake itself in its final words. A few weeks after Eleanor Wade's body was recovered, the case forgotten for nearly half a century now officially entered the legal phase. In the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Building, Chief Deputy Prosecutor Laura Keating, who had handled many of the state's major cold cases, sat before a thick pile of documents, marking key lines with red pen. On the table were four main evidence categories: original 1964 exhibits, Dennis Vaughn's signed statement, Richard Wade's confession pinpointing the body site, and the full 3D forensics file confirming pre-death injuries. Each piece of evidence, from different eras, now chained perfectly into one story, one Wade could no longer deny. In that morning's internal meeting, Keating opened bluntly. "We don't have video, no direct eyewitness, but we have everything that matters: forensic consistency." She projected the simulated push on the Splendor 2 deck, then switched to the photo of Eleanor's body found in the nylon bag. "This is murder, nothing else. But considering the time, age, and his statement of acting in panic, we propose charging with second-degree murder, killing without premeditated intent, but with intentional infliction of injury leading to death." Ralph Hernandez and Karina were present, sitting silently watching. To them, this wasn't just a prosecution, but the end of a nearly half-century journey to restore justice for the forgotten woman. As Keating listed the evidence roster, her voice decisive, original exhibits include the red coat shattered bourbon bottle, ship log, fabric scrap, and bone sample matching DNA. Vaughn's witness statement confirms obstruction of rescue contact. The defendant's body site indication breaks his own alibi. And finally, 3D forensics results affirm impact trauma before death. Matching the dinghy dent location, she placed her hand on the file stack. "Every piece is in place. We present to the grand jury on Monday." On February 15, 2011, at the Maricopa County Courthouse, the grand jury presentation began. In the small room, 12 jurors sat in rows, hearing every detail recounted. Keating opened in a warm but sharp tone. "This isn't just an old case, it's a prime example of how science and time can illuminate what fear once obscured." She detailed the rainy 1964 night, citing Vaughn's account, and projected Canyon Lake sonar images on screen. When she reached the body recovery portion, the room fell utterly silent, no whispers. Hernandez was called to testify as lead investigator. He recounted briefly, without embellishment. He said, "You'll never find her, but we did." And everything matched what he described, from the dinghy position to the body site coordinates. Karina added, "What Eleanor endured couldn't be an accident. She was struck, pushed, and hidden." Only in 2010 did the lake return the evidence. When the hearing ended, Keating presented the charging proposal, based on physical evidence, witness statements, and the defendant's own admission. The prosecution seeks indictment for second-degree murder under Arizona Criminal Code. Section 13-1104. She looked directly at the panel, not for revenge, but because justice hung for 46 years. The jury retired to deliberate. The meeting room sank into silence. Hernandez and Karina stood in the hallway, afternoon sun slanting through windows onto posters of old cases solved by DNA. After over 2 hours, the door opened. The court clerk held the verdict. Grand jury has approved the indictment. Karina squeezed Hernandez's hand lightly, saying nothing, just giving him a weary smile. He nodded. So Eleanor finally gets her day in court. The next day, the prosecutor's office officially announced the indictment of Richard Wade on second-degree murder charges. The charging document was read to the media, but Keating clarified, "We're not seeking a public villain, but truth for a woman robbed of her voice." In the Phoenix jail, upon hearing of the indictment, Wade showed no surprise. He only asked, "Will anyone come to the trial?" The guard replied, "The whole country." Wade gave a faint smile. "Then I finally have one more memorable role." And at Canyon Lake, the ceiling tape had been removed, the water returning to stillness. But to those involved in the investigation, the lake was no longer just a tourist spot, it was the keeper of a case's memory that made the world look back, that justice, though late, can still rise from the deepest place. March 2011, the Maricopa County Courthouse in downtown Phoenix was packed. 46 years after the fateful night on Canyon Lake, the name Richard Wade hit headlines again, but not in the entertainment section. Outside the hallway, TV reporters jostled, lenses aimed at the large wooden door engraved Superior Court of Arizona. Inside, Courtroom 3 had been prepped for weeks. Large projector for 3D simulations, forensics photo projector and original exhibits, the red coat, shattered bourbon bottle, ship log. In the defendant's row, Richard Wade sat upright, gray suit on, silver-white hair, hands clasped over his chest. He looked like a man used to being watched, but not like this. Chief Deputy Prosecutor Laura Keating stepped to the podium, voice clear and composed. "Your Honor, this isn't just a case about a death. It's the story of a woman stripped of the chance to say what happened to her." She projected the first image, the Splendor deck on November 28, 1964, reconstructed in 3D light lines, simulated wind direction, light positions, and fall trajectory. Forensics determines the fall couldn't be natural. Impact force from the front, from a man 20 centimeters taller than the victim, exactly Richard Wade. Keating pointed to the screen, where the 3D model showed the push slamming Eleanor's body against the railing, then falling onto the small dinghy. This was intentional, not a slip, not an accident. Below, Wade looked up, face emotionless. In the front row, Karina and Hernandez sat quietly, following every detail. When Keating moved to physical evidence, she carefully lifted the red coat in its glass case. "This is the coat Eleanor Wade wore that night." Tears and frayed fibers matched the starboard wood of the dinghy, where the bone fragment and decayed nylon were found. "DNA confirms it's hers." She paused a beat, voice lowering. "We can't bring her back to life, but with science, we can let her be heard again." The first witness called was Dennis Vaughn, at 72, with silver hair and trembling voice, but his account sharp as a cut. "I heard them arguing," she screamed. Then he turned off the lights. "When I wanted to call for help," he said, "don't call anyone." The room went dead silent. The prosecutor asked, "Did you suspect anything?" Vaughn looked down, voice choking. "I knew she was dead that night. I was a coward. I didn't dare speak." Wade's defense attorney, a young man named Miles Harcourt, stood to object. "The witness has no direct evidence. He didn't see the violent act." The judge nodded, allowing continuation. Harcourt stepped toward the jury, voice gentle. "My client lost control in a tragic accident. He loved his wife. He panicked, not knowing how to handle when she fell into the water. His confession was for redemption, not criminal evidence." When it was Wade's turn at the stand, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. He gripped the microphone, voice raspy. "Eleanor and I argued. Yes, but I didn't kill her. She slipped. I couldn't hold her. When I saw her sinking, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Keating stood, interrupting. If it was an accident, why did you turn off the lights? Why didn't you call the police for over an hour? Wade fell silent. She continued. Why was her body wrapped in nylon and chained with iron, hidden in a cove 300 meters from the scene? Wade bowed his head, not responding. Forensic pathologist Dr. Helen Westcott was called as an expert witness. She pointed to the broken rib image on the screen. This fracture couldn't be from falling into water. It's from direct impact, with concentrated force, typical of a push or heavy blow. When the defense attorney asked, could it be from hitting the dinghy on the way down? Westcott replied without hesitation, no. The impact angle is completely opposite the fall direction. This is active force, not accidental. In the afternoon, the prosecution played the recorded confession from jail. The echo of Wade's voice through the speakers. I hid her in a cove east of the marina. A hush fell over the room. The jury exchanged glances, no one speaking. Keating closed her presentation. 46 years he lied to police, to the public, and when he could no longer hide, he pointed out the body site himself. That wasn't panic. That was guilty knowledge. The defense tried to pivot. No witness saw the push. No weapon. No motive beyond an argument. But each argument was rebutted by the prosecution with forensics and technical data. Finally, when Keating delivered her closing, we don't ask you to convict on emotion, we ask you to see the truth. Eleanor didn't fall on her own, she was pushed, struck, hidden, and he knew it. The air in the room seemed to solidify. When court recessed for jury deliberation, Hernandez and Karina stepped into the hallway. Afternoon sunlight pierced the frosted glass, casting on their weary but resolute faces. What do you think they'll decide? Karina asked softly. Hernandez replied, I believe in the truth. And this time, it's big enough no one can ignore it. Inside the deliberation room, the 12 jurors sat around a round table, before them photos, maps, 3D models. No one spoke for the first few minutes, only wind whistling through the door crack. Then the foreperson spoke. The only question, is it intentional killing? A middle-aged woman nodded. It doesn't need premeditation from the start. The action was enough to kill. Another man added, he didn't call for help. He hid the body. That's not an accident. As Phoenix sun set, the room lit under golden lamps. The vote sheet passed hands. A long silent moment, then the foreperson tapped her pen on the table. We have a verdict. Outside in the twilight, traffic hummed like blending with the slow breaths of those waiting for the end of a case Arizona had carried in its heart for half a century. On the morning of March 22, 2011, Courtroom 3 of the Maricopa County Superior Court was packed. Outside, a line of reporters pressed against the iron barricade, cameras aimed at the heavy wooden door. Inside, the air was thick, only the soft tap of pens on desks audible. In the front row, Ralph Hernandez and Lieutenant Karina sat side by side, ahead of them prosecutor Laura Keating, still composed and stern. At the defendant's bench, Richard Wade sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes on the marble floor. The once film star was now just an aged shadow of himself, shoulders trembling slightly under the white lights. Judge Harold Connors entered, banging the gavel 3 times. Court reconvened. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, stood, voice firm. Your Honor, after reviewing all evidence, testimony, and forensic documents, we find Defendant Richard Wade guilty of second-degree murder. A small wave of sound rippled through the room, like held breaths released at once. Hernandez looked down, hands clenched. Karina exhaled softly, eyes fixed on the bowed man at the bench. Keating just nodded slightly, no emotion shown. She had waited to hear those 2 words. Guilty, for nearly half a century since Eleanor Wade was struck from the investigative files. Judge Connors read the jury's summary slowly. Based on forensic evidence showing pre-death trauma, testimony confirming obstruction of rescue, and intentional concealment of the body over a long period, The court determines the defendant's actions were conscious and led to the victim's death. This constitutes second-degree murder under Arizona Criminal Code Section 13-1104. When the judge asked if the defendant had final words, Wade lifted his head, eyes cloudy. He spoke softly, voice raspy as old wind. "I have no regrets for loving her. Things got out of control. I just wanted her quiet, just for one night, but she never was." The room went dead silent. Keating didn't look at him, just bowed her head to note. The judge banged the gavel. The court sentences defendant Richard Wade, age 79, to 20 years imprisonment at the Florence Correctional Facility, Arizona. Appeal deadline is 30 days from today. The gavel's thud echoed dryly, reverberating through the wooden rows. A case once filed as presumed drowning, officially closed under the cold line. Case hash 64-1129. Eleanor Wade, homicide, solved 2011. Wade rose as officers approached to escort him. On the way to the door, he turned his head, gaze lingering where Hernandez and Karina sat. Not quite hatred, nor remorse, just the emptiness of a man, knowing nowhere left to hide. "She was always afraid of water," he said softly, voice nearly dissolving in the crowd's murmur. "And in the end, I left her there," Karina replied quietly. "And you'll carry it with you for the rest of your life." Outside, Phoenix blazed under sun. As Wade was led from court in a police cordon, dozens of lenses followed, capturing the moment he stepped into the prisoner transport. The steel door shut with a clack, like a period at the end of a 46-year story. Hernandez stood on the steps, watching, heart both relieved and heavy. "It's over," he said. Karina replied, "No, this is justice. The truth has rested under the lake for a long time." A few weeks later, Arizona papers blared, "Richard Wade convicted of second-degree murder. Eleanor Wade case solved after 46 years. Black and white photos of Eleanor reappeared, her radiant smile amid the 60s sky, captioned, "Her story finally found its ending." At Canyon Lake, the water lay mirror still. The sealing tape removed, only a small plaque remained on shore, engraved in bronze, "In memory of Eleanor Wade. 1931-1964. Justice found, 2011. Each evening, sunset lit the plaque, casting copper red on the water, where the story began and ended. In the cold case office, the file marked case hash 64-1129 was reshelved, cover now noting, "Closed, verdict, guilty, second-degree murder." Hernandez placed his hand on the file, saying softly, 46 years, and finally, she was called by her right name, victim. Karina nodded, switching off the desk lamp. Outside the window, Phoenix night fell slowly, peaceful. The story of Eleanor Wade, the actress who vanished amid black water in 1964, ended not with waves, but with a verdict. One man convicted, one at rest, and a lake no longer holding secrets. After 46 years, justice returned, closing forever, Arizona's longest mystery, the case still called the Canyon Lake case. June 2011, 3 months after sentencing, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office officially released the final forensic and investigative report on the Eleanor Wade case. A 186-page dossier marking closure of one of Arizona's most complex cold case investigations. The report was compiled by the Cold Case Task Force, led by Lieutenant Karina, with technical analysis by Detective Ralph Hernandez and the Phoenix Forensics team. Each page crystallized nearly 2 years of scene reconstruction, hundreds of hours sifting evidence, and the era's most advanced forensics. The introduction summarized the crux. The case was never unsolved, it was unfinished. That line captured the case's essence. The truth didn't vanish, only obscured by time and technical limits. 3 factors were identified as turning points enabling successful reopening. 1. 3D scene reconstruction. 2. The confession verifying the body-hiding coordinates. And 3. DNA results matching Eleanor's archived sample perfectly. The report detailed the 2010 evidence recovery process. Once seemingly worthless items, the shattered bottle, red coat, liquor vial, decayed fabric, were rescanned and reanalyzed via spectroscopy and microtrace DNA. From those tiny artifacts, investigators determined the victim wasn't intoxicated and had suffered a salt force before death. Additionally, the incomplete ship log and breaker data verified lights out at 11:47 p.m., aligning with Captain Dennis Vaughn's account. Every small piece, reassembled, painted the full picture prior generations missed. The mid-report criminal analysis classified Wade's behavior as conscious in a moment of impulse, intentional infliction of injury, leading to death, constituting second-degree murder. A comparison table of 1964 and 2010 statements revealed nearly 37 detailed contradictions, especially in the 11:30–1 a.m. window, the period Eleanor was deemed missing. Wade's deliberate lights-off, rescue contact delay and body concealment were listed as 3 acts proving consciousness of guilt. A dedicated chapter on operations chronicled the investigation from Hernandez, discovering the old file box in storage, to the arrest warrant signing. Timelines, sonar maps, GPS coordinate copies, body recovery images, and Vaughn's statement were all appended. The conclusion credited success to the synergy of human intuition and forensic science, affirming technology's role in restoring justice for cold cases. Upon completion, the report went to the Federal Bureau of Justice and National Cold Case Institute. A month later, the Eleanor Wade case, He/64-1129, was selected as official training material for the National Special Investigator Program. At the Cold Case Summit in Denver, Karina presented before hundreds of police and prosecutors from across states. As she projected the reconstructed deck image, the room hushed. "Sometimes," she said, "we don't need to find something new. We just need to look back at what was forgotten." After her talk, Hernandez was asked what made them believe in this case when most deemed it long dead. He just smiled, glancing at Eleanor's black and white photo framed on the projector, and replied concisely, "The evidence was there, we just listened." That line became the report's closing, etched on the official file's final page. And at Canyon Lake, where late sun still sparkled on water, those involved understood, justice doesn't always speak immediately, but if patiently heard, it eventually will. July 2011. News of the verdict and investigative report on Eleanor Wade swept America like a wave. Major papers, the Arizona Republic, Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, splashed front pages, "Justice after 46 years. The Canyon Lake mystery solved." Images of the long-ago actress, radiant smile and bright eyes, reappeared on national TV. But this time, people spoke not of her roles, but of the extraordinary journey of those who pulled truth from the lake's depths. In Phoenix, local stations aired a 40-minute special recounting the full investigation. Viewers hushed as screens showed the dinghy recovery and technicians confirming the bones' DNA match. Social media flooded with comments, "Justice never expires. A file may sleep, but justice doesn't." Arizona's community reeled, not just from the shocking truth, but from the investigators' tenacity. Law schools, police academies, and forensic centers used the case as a prime example of forensics' role in cracking cold cases. The Arizona Forensic Institute launched a special training course titled Legacy of Eleanor Wade, using the 186-page report as curriculum. At opening, Lieutenant Karina spoke briefly, voice low but resolute, "All evidence was there, we just needed patience to listen." At Maricopa Sheriff's Office, the cold case team was honored. No fanfare, just a small internal ceremony, but when Ralph Hernandez's name was called, the hall rose in applause. He smiled, bowing as he received the commendation from the chief. "You didn't give up," the commander said, and because of that, a woman got her voice back. Hernandez replied softly, "I just finished what the previous generation couldn't." Beside him, Karina gripped her gold badge engraved #64-1129, eyes on Eleanor's photo centered in the hall, her face glowing in the black and white frame. Prosecutor Laura Keating also received the Arizona Prosecutors Association's Justice Award 2011 for tenacity and precision in prosecuting a historic case. In her speech, she said, "Justice has no statute of limitations. It just waits for the right moment to be named." The hall silenced as screens replayed her courtroom closing. Eleanor didn't fall on her own. She was pushed, struck, hidden, and that truth was returned today. Forensics experts nationwide hailed it as a new benchmark for late-stage criminal investigation. The Phoenix Forensic Lab's technical report, published in the Journal of Criminal Science, detailing light trace restoration in 1964 film, 3D fall trajectory simulation, and DNA extraction from half-century submerged bone. The article concluded, "Technology lets us revisit the past, but human persistence makes the past speak." News of the case also made Canyon Lake locals revisit their history. For years, the lake was a serene tourist spot for family camping, boating, fishing. No one imagining the tragedy buried beneath. Once public, visitors surged, not for scenery, but to see where Arizona history hid. Lakeside eateries hung small plaques. In memory of Eleanor Wade, 1931, 1964. Justice found, 2011. In September that year, a formal memorial was held at Canyon Lake's East Shore, exactly where Eleanor's body was found. Over 200 attended: police, prosecutors, forensics experts, and locals who'd followed the case. Arizona's sky that day was rare, clear blue, light wind rippling the water. Hernandez stood beside Karina, eyes following white calla lilies drifting mid-lake. Eleanor's mother, now nearly 90, was escorted by family. Trembling, she touched the bronze plaque with her daughter's name. Eyes tear-blurred, "My girl waited so long." Karina stepped up to speak, her voice calm, clear, but laced with emotion. "This place was once silence, fear, and lies. But today it's truth. She's no longer in the dark." She paused, gazing at sunset-reflected water. Justice isn't an end. It's how the dead find peace, and the living can forgive. After the ceremony, all stood silent as sunset fell on Canyon Lake. Last light dyed water red, glinting off lakeside boulders. Right there, over half a century ago, Eleanor Wade lay. Now that spot symbolized perseverance and faith in justice. Press dubbed it the lake that spoke. That evening, TV news replayed memorial footage, the anchor's voice slow over somber music. For decades, Canyon Lake kept its secret. But truth, like water, always rises. That line was engraved on the official memorial plaque, erected at the marina a month later. As morning light hit the gray granite, those words gleamed like written in water itself. A reminder that no matter how deep time buries, truth will surface, quietly but unstoppable. And there, amid Arizona's vast sky, Canyon Lake returned to its inherent stillness. But this time, it was no longer the silence of secrets, but the peace of completed justice. The Eleanor Wade story reminds us, in today's American life, that justice often comes from three intertwined things: persistent people, proper process, and technology that listens to truth. At Canyon Lake, truth rose not by luck, but specific actions. Dennis Vaughn finally saying he told me not to call anyone. Investigators reconstructing the Splendor 2-deck fall angle in 3D simulation. Sonar scanning the lake bed, then confirming DNA from the bone fragment and red coat fibers. For everyday life, this translates to practical habits. When witnessing domestic violence or hearing cries like Vaughn's, "No, don't assume just an argument, call 911, note time." Describe sounds, lights. Lights out at 11:47 p.m. became key. If you're a victim, small records like saving bruise photos, threat texts, or sharing schedules with trusted people can be your red fabric years later. For a community, the Justice After 46 Years lesson is sustained investment in cold case units, proper evidence storage, no paper bags, unsealed, like 1964, funding forensics gear, film scanners, simulation software, micro-DNA testing, and encouraging local stations like Desert Mysteries specials to jog witness memories. Legally, honor Miranda rights and due process. The standard interrogation, no coercion, made I hid her in a cove east of the marina, ironclad in court. Ultimately, don't overlook small details. Dinghy dent, tripped breaker, 100-minute gap in family, workplace or community. Those are early signals for intervention before tragedy becomes permanent. If you believe justice, no matter how late, deserves to be heard. Subscribe to join us in exploring cases thought forgotten. Thank you for joining the Eleanor Wade story. See you in the next video, where truth rises once more from time's silences.